So welcome all. Thank you so much to our panelists for agreeing to do this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves briefly, about 2 minutes. And as part of that, I would love it if you gave a little anecdote of how you turned a potential negative situation in your career into something really positive that worked for you. So that will be really helpful for people who are trying to navigate their own career paths to think, oh, well, somebody else has encountered something similar to me, and look, they made something amazing come out of it. So Andrea, could we start off with you, please? So just a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and turn a negative into a positive.
Hi, sure. This is Andrea Bertozzi. I'm at UCLA. It's 8 o'clock in the morning here in Los Angeles, and so don't expect too much from me because I tend to wake up slowly. But that said, a negative into a positive, I would say probably one of my job searches, where I can think of a number of examples from job searches, frankly, but God, where to start? Okay, so one example I can think of was, this was back in the day before one would upload letters of recommendation onto electronic systems, and everything was done by paper. And I was a postdoc, and my department was mailing out, hard copies of my letters. And apparently something went wrong and they didn't get sent to several places. But I actually was on top of that, and I contacted individuals at the other institutions to ask if my letters had arrived. And in one of those cases was Duke University, where I ended up getting the job. But I think the fact that I contacted somebody on the faculty, when the letters actually came, that person read my letters, right? Because I asked him to check and see if they were there. And so he read them. And within a couple of days, I got a call for an interview. So, I think the fact that I followed up on just making sure that my application was complete may have, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it might have caused the people on the hiring committee to take a second look at it. So I would encourage, you don't want to pester professors on hiring committees unduly, but just like a little short, anything that's sort of short and polite to get them to check your file might end up having them see things that they might have missed otherwise, potentially.
That's an awesome anecdote. Thank you so much. I think we can all learn from that at whatever career stage we're at. Perhaps now, Caroline, we can move on to you, please.
Sure, happy to. Yeah, so I'm a faculty member at MIT in electrical engineering and computer science and the Institute for Data Systems and Society. I've been here since 2015 and was a faculty member at IST Austria before moving to MIT. So something negative that was turned into something positive. Maybe just an experience, maybe since we've been talking about faculty interviews or getting jobs. I think something to be aware of, and that I certainly made the experience, is that you'd never know what the politics are in a particular department. It can be, and this has happened to me, that a talk can be super hostile, for example, and this can be your job talk, and it's as much an interview for you to the department as it is the other way around. But you actually don't know, and this particular one, actually I got an offer in the end. So you just don't know who are the people that actually make decisions in a particular department, and just not to take things like this too personally. But of course, it is then maybe not a place that you want to go to, because you also learn a lot from departments and from how they actually talk to each other. But you just don't know, right? Even if something goes badly with some people, they might not be the people who are actually making decisions. But certainly for you to learn that maybe that's not the department you want to be in.
Again, very good continuing wise words. Thank you. Marinka, can we go on to you, please?
Of course. Hi, everyone. This is Marinka Zitnik. I'm an assistant professor at Harvard Biomedical Informatics and also have additional appointments at Harvard Data Science and Broad Institute. So something negative that I turned into positive, I would build on what previous speakers said and kind of take a bit different perspective on the fit of your research into a particular department, or when you're applying for fellowships or jobs or postdoctoral fellowships and so on. So you should always apply, even if you think that the job ad does not necessarily fully 100% match to your expertise. In my experience, because I work at, I would say, at borders of several disciplines, in particular related to machine learning and questions in biology and medicine, it was often this question that I asked myself as, what is then the best fit for me in terms of how should I position myself when applying for fellowships? And so what I would encourage you that you always try to identify what are the unique skills or expertise that you might have that you could make you like a unicorn or a superstar, and then kind of take that into your advantage. Don't think of that as a disadvantage, but really see and make a case how having the expertise that is unusual, uncommon, can actually allow you to do the kind of research that not many others can do. And kind of, I would think of that as a power now, rather than an issue or a problem to be solved or something like that, which is, for example, something I kind of struggled with when I was applying for PhD or postdoctoral positions. So that's what I would say.
Again, thank you. Very, very helpful. Stephanie, can we go on to you, please? A little bit about yourself and also turning a negative into a positive.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm also faculty at MIT in the Electrical Engineering and Computer Science department. And I'm also part of the Computer Science and AI lab at MIT. So I have two possible messages about negative. So the first one is paper rejections that we all know. So I think like most of my most successful papers got rejected first from another conference, including one that got a best paper award. So if your paper gets rejected, don't give up, like make it a better paper and submit it again. It happens. The second thing is like more of a personal thing, where like, I think it was a difficult thing. So like this is one of those famous cases where like both partners are in academia and we were trying to find a job together and it was just not working out. And probably the only reason that I took up this MIT offer was that nothing else worked out. So yes, in the end, it all went fine, but this was the difficult situation. So don't give up.
That's very, very wise words. And perhaps we might hear a little bit more about the two-body problem later on during this panel session, because I know that's something that's very relevant to many of us. Ingrid, can we go on to you now, please? Is Ingrid there? Let me have a look and see. No. Oh, right. In which case, Rachel, can we go on to you, please?
Sure. My name is Rachel Ward. I'm a professor in the math department at UT Austin. I'm also a member of the Odin Institute at UT Austin. Turn a negative into positive. When I was applying to undergrad, I applied to all of the top schools and I got rejected from every single one. And then I applied to UT Austin also, which I got into automatically as a Texas top 10% rule because I'm from Texas. And that was a real big bummer to me, to my ego. I was very sad about that. So I went to UT as an undergrad as, you know, feeling sad about that. But that turned out to be a good thing for my personality, because at UT there was space for me to be like the star in applied mathematics and get to know the professors really well and to gain confidence and also to learn street smarts, to learn that in order to get to the next level, from UT, I have to play the politics and learn how to do that. And in the end, when I went to Princeton as a grad student and saw the undergrad math major at Princeton, I really don't think I would have stayed in math if I had been a math major as an undergrad in Princeton, just due to the atmosphere and my personality.
Thank you. Do you want to say a little bit more about did you say street smart in academia? It was a lovely phrase you used.
Yeah, just getting to know professors well, understanding that the letters of recommendation for grad school were going to be important, and that especially coming from a state school compared to other people coming from private schools, I had to really focus on that more.
I think that's such important advice, because I think so many of us going into the profession don't realize how important that is, that networking. So to the early career participants who are here, take advantage of this opportunity that you've got in this room now, and also online with the community, because that's a really valuable resource. So maybe we could now move on to our first main questions. So maybe we can start with you, Marinka. So who or what had the biggest impact on your career? So career choices, career successes.
That's a great question. So I would say a variety of different people. One was certainly, I was lucky to have a brother who is also in science, and he's a bit older than me, and I kind of always looked up to him and followed his advice very closely. But then also had a chance to have a number of mentors who were very gracious with their time and advice, starting in the undergraduate. And so I think it's really, really incredibly important to be able to find those mentors. And probably you might have a number of different mentors at any point in time that can give you advice about the kind of schools or fellowships you would want to apply, the kind of research you might want to do, what kind of conferences or research events to attend. And so I was lucky in my first year of undergraduate, I was looking for research opportunities, and I was always very excited in medicine, but I couldn't study that. I've been studying mathematics and computer science, and then I learned about that emerging field of bioinformatics, and that I learned that by actually attending a course from a professor who was kind of very enthusiastic about that research in that field. And he was one of my first mentors who introduced me to that field at the intersections of multiple disciplines, and it also opened doors to future opportunities for me, in particular to be able to go from a small university in Europe where I was doing my undergraduate and spent substantial amount of time at, then in London and Toronto and Houston, and then later on going to Stanford for my postdoctoral research. So he was one of my first mentors that I really, I think was an important person for me. The other one I would say is was my postdoctoral research mentor at Stanford, Yuri Leiskovets. He was the kind of person that has taught me not only about how to do great research, but also gave me advice about how to navigate a research enterprise, in the sense, what are the parts that are important, how to write good papers, but also how to present them well, what conferences to attend, and how to kind of think about positioning yourself or planning research for many years ahead.
Thank you very much. Mentors, a vital ingredient. I think we can all agree on that one. Andrea, can I ask the same question of you? So who or what has had the biggest impact on your career?
I'm sorry, what has had the biggest impact on my career?
Who or what has had the biggest impact on your career?
That's a good question. You know, I can point to a lot of things, but I think one of the biggest role models actually was my dad, who was an MIT experimental nuclear physicist when I was growing up. And he, you know, unlike some of my fellow students in grade school, who had parents, you know, helping them a lot with homework and stuff. He was very hands-off. But the one time I remember him explaining stuff to me was when I was about, I don't know, 6 or 7, learning long division in the family room. But just having, you know, encouragement, right, to want to, you know, I mean, you know, I was told I could be an experimental physicist if I wanted to. I chose not to, but just having that encouragement, you know, kind of removing any sort of mental barriers, you know, especially being born in the 60s, right? I'm one of the oldest women in the US in the sort of post, you know, growing up post Title IX, right, in terms of the educational system. So there were still a lot of, I would say, systemic sort of barriers to women going into very technical fields. And, you know, growing up in a family where, you know, things would be brought home for us to play with, like magnets and so forth. You know, I just felt like there were just no, when I was young, just no barriers, right, to becoming a scientist.
Great answer. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Perhaps I might ask another question now, and maybe we might start off with Stephanie here. Would you like to talk a little bit about some of the ways that you contribute to supporting women in maths, or increasing the gender balance or diversity more broadly?
Yeah, I think there is many different like stages of this. So the first one is that I myself have a pretty diverse group of students that I'm mentoring. And of course, I take out a lot of time in like also mentoring, not only in the research part, but also in other like career issues, etc. And then I'm also very supportive of students who seek advice. Like I'm on several thesis committees of female students. And whenever they ask me, I typically make time to give them advice on like, say, their statement or other questions they may have, even beyond the PhD sometimes. And then there's other like more broader things like supporting events like these, being on panels, giving talks at events for females. I'm on the advisory board of an association called the Learning Theory Alliance, which is broader like mentoring and networking in learning theory, which is a very nice network. We have a Women in Data Science workshop here in Cambridge, where I'm on the faculty board, and actually Caroline too. So there's events like this that I typically try to support as much as I can. And then like there's other things when I'm in leadership roles. So for example, I was a workshop chair at NeurIPS once, and there we really made sure that there's like a good amount of diversity. And this was not only gender balance, this was like diversity across all scales of diversity in terms of perspective, seniority, like locality, access to time zones because it was virtual, and gender, etc., etc. So I think all of this helps in bringing people in.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Has Ingrid joined again or not? Not yet, in which case we'll see if we can get hold of her. Maybe somebody might message her, but I might ask, Rachel, would you be happy to take that question as well? Thank you. So in what ways do you contribute to supporting women or maths and or increasing the gender balance?
Oh, well, partly I think just being here, being a woman in a prominent position at a big university, female students are drawn to work with me. I think I myself was drawn to work with female mentors when I was younger. I think having role models and just seeing someone of your gender that you can have a goal to aspire to is so important. But explicitly, I write lots of letters of recommendation for women, not just my former students, but if you are a woman and you want to be faculty and you're doing great work and you need a letter of recommendation, please email me, reach out to me. Nominate women for awards, Young Career Awards, always speak up and nominate them for positions and faculty hiring meetings and so on.
Thank you. That's very wise, and something that we take very seriously is making sure that we have women and representation across all different metrics on our organizing panels, workshop organizing panels and things, because things like that, you know, being an organizer on an I&I program is a really nice thing to put down on a CV if you're looking to get a new job. So that's one of the things that we're mindful of, and also speaking here, we're really monitor gender representations amongst our speakers. So maybe I might come on to my next question. So maybe Caroline, I might ask this of you. So does the responsibility for increasing the representation of women in maths lie with individuals or institutions?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. I really think it is with both. We all have to do our part to it. So in terms of course, with individuals, I think we've heard a lot of the things that we can do and are doing. But, you know, there is more than just us here, right? And as women actually doing our part. I think we see the problems and therefore can also really help with some of the issues, just because we have been, we have often experienced them ourselves and you know what some of the biggest issues are. But I think, you know, just having the whole burden on us is of course also not the right approach. And there are some things that we cannot do. Like, I mean, there are some things that institutions can do, for example, at MIT with, you know, fellowships for PhD program, for PhD students, etc., where we really want to increase the number of women in our ECS programs. There are things like this and DI efforts that are more institute-wide and can change, you know, cultures, and can also bring in points like maybe, you know, in department meetings, how people talk about applications and applicants, things like this that can only be changed top down, or things that institutions have to take on. In the end, you know, we want it to be changed in every institution, and so things have to also, some of the things have to be done top down. But I think even in when you want institutions to change something, it still requires people. So it's super important that we actually all do our parts on these committees and actually participate in these committees and be part of the change. So I think it is really both, but you know, even institutions need people. So in the end, it comes down to individual people.
Good answer, thank you. Rachel, can I ask the same of you, please? So do you reckon that responsibility for increasing representation of women in maths lies with individuals or institutions?
I think that's a really difficult question. It's very good, but I definitely think that a lot of responsibility lies within institutions. And it's also difficult to say which institutions, because people are motivated by money and funding, and a lot of the research at institutions are funded by government agencies and now also industry. And so that, you know, trickles down to their responsibility to fund diverse and broad projects with broader impacts, interdisciplinary, and I think that would trickle more down to individuals being incentivized to do so as well.
Money talks. Thank you very much. Now, perhaps I might move on to my next question, which is going back to more of a personal thing. So what do you enjoy most about your work in mathematics? What fascinates you about your research? And Caroline, can we go back to you for that one, please?
Sure. Yeah, so I work at the intersection, similar to Marinka, at the intersection of the biomedical sciences and machine learning and mathematics, and have been very excited about, you know, having mathematics as a language for looking at particular biomedical questions, and being able to maybe formalize questions differently than someone who would come out of the biomedical sciences. I'm really excited about this intersection and the collaborations, the interdisciplinary collaborations at this point of like really creating new knowledge in the biomedical sciences, driven by particular deep questions in the biological sciences, and really having to work together, right, to identify the right questions and then come up with the right mathematical and statistical and machine learning formalism to actually look at these questions. And having biology like drive some of the some of the computational questions that we're asking, like, even questions in machine learning on the theoretical side that we need to answer in order to get back to the biological questions. So I think that has been for me this exciting thing of going back and forth of like, biological questions and then really going deep onto, say, for me, for example, questions about causality and how to be able to get at causal relationships just from data, and then bringing that back into biology and biomedical sciences, and really seeing how that can actually advance the sciences in that space. So that to me has been super exciting, and just the collaborations themselves I feel are really, really exciting.
Fantastic, thank you. Andrea, may we go back to you as well on that? So what fascinates you? What do you enjoy most about your mathematics? What fascinates you about your research?
Well, I think, looking back across my career, I would say what really fascinates me is using mathematics as a language to describe the world, and in particular, finding new areas of science research where where you can see parallels between how that language has been used already in other fields. So one example is that, for the past 10 years or so, I've been working on in an area of machine learning involving graphs and classification and things like that. But some of the main ideas actually are sort of taken from like isoparametric problems in geometry, minimal surfaces, where we sort of adapt the ideas from differential geometry and PDE for problems that are very discrete in data science, right? It's really fun to see how mathematics that was developed, say, a couple decades ago in a completely different area can be kind of retooled to solve problems in a new and very active area of research. So that's just one example, but I feel like my career has, a lot of the areas that I've kind of developed in my career have had this kind of, structure to them.
Great, thank you. Rachel, can I throw the same question at you, please? So what do you enjoy most about your mathematics, your research?
I really enjoy interacting with practitioners, engineers, and turning or extracting from algorithms or heuristics or what's it called? Legends or just feelings, rigorous mathematical proofs. So extracting what the right framework and questions are that can even be framed in terms of a theorem and proof. And then icing on the cake is when, as Andrea was saying, in the process of doing this, you realize that some mathematics from a different discipline a decade or 5 years ago or 1 year ago happens to be exactly what you need to prove it. And that happens a lot, and it's wonderful.
And occasionally 200 years ago, 300 years ago. God bless Euclid. So perhaps I might move on to the next question, and we can come back to some of these later on. But perhaps I might ask, what would be the benefits of gender balance to research? So that's quite an interesting question. So why are we striving for this? What are the benefits? And maybe Stephanie, can we go to you first on this one, please?
Okay, yeah, it's a good question. I think one part is definitely the benefit to research in the sense that often progress comes with completely new ideas, like new connections or so. And to get these connections, we should not exclude anyone from a field, like independent of gender or anything, because we need the ideas of everyone and different viewpoints. So I think just excluding people would just you're cutting off a part that may have great ideas. So this is kind of stupid. So I think research in general can benefit from different viewpoints, different ideas for progress. The other thing that's actually that I have observed is that women and men interact a bit differently also in research groups, and the dynamics of a research project or group change sometimes with the people that are in there. So this was actually something that my uncle told me long ago. He was a manager at a big company, and he said, "I'm always trying to get women into my teams, like somehow they interact better." And I've observed this with many of like students and postdocs, is that like people of different gender interact a bit differently. So I think it can overall also increase productivity because of that.
I think those are very wise words, and I think diversity more broadly, actually, we can extrapolate that out too. I think I really love working in diverse teams when possible. Marinka, can we ask the same of you, please? So what benefits do you think there are for having greater diversity?
I think there is a multitude of benefits. So one of them that I'd like to highlight is certainly even realizing what are questions that are worth exploring, that are often overlooked by communities that are very homogeneous, right? We have very many examples of those kind of questions that, for example, arise in the context of biomedical data and biomedical data analysis, where there were certain problems or diseases overlooked or neglected because there were very few researchers or individuals with expertise being able to jump into those areas and explore them. And so there are also many other factors that would influence those kinds of biases that can arise. And I think it's then important to have the diversity of backgrounds, perspectives, to be able to identify, well, what are the kind of problems we should be working on? Because perhaps a problem that we might be working on actually might not have such a broad impact that we might think, because there's certainly, we might not aware of how beneficial might be, for example, a particular algorithm that we are developing for a certain community if there's no one from that community involved in research or just even formulating the problem. So I think that's important. One important aspect out of many questions we can work on. What are those questions that are likely to be most impactful, especially when we are talking more about applied related research, for example, in machine learning. The other part is certainly relates to this notion that there have been studies in management science and in social sciences where they have actually explored the diversity of groups and tried to correlate that with various aspects of impact of research or productivity or the dynamics. And some of the results there clearly indicate that there is this added effect that goes beyond just having an additive effect of the number of individuals that are in the group, and that translates directly to the outcome of research. But then that it's really important to have the diversity of thoughts and perspectives. So often when we get stuck in a local problem or local minimum of solution, it's typically someone from a different field, someone from a different background, often comes with an idea of, oh, I have seen this problem in a completely different field or a related problem, and kind of that can help us make progress on research. And it would not be possible if the entire team on a research project would be homogeneous.
Cool. Thank you very much. Thank you. Great answer. Now I'm going to ask another question, which we slightly touched on before, but it's more directly focusing on this question. So there's more and more pressure on institutions to change by means of funding. So is funding the best incentive? Is it the only incentive? What other incentives are there? Could there be other incentives for institutions to change? So maybe Andrea, could you take that for us, please?
That's a really good question. It's tricky, right? Because you want to somehow convey fairness, right? Whatever that means. But at the same time, you want to make sure that, the best candidates have every opportunity. I tend to look at the diversity issue, especially with regards to hiring and promotion. I'm sort of trained partially in physics, so I tend to look at it almost like a percolation problem. You have a very complex professional and social network. of people interacting both scientifically and also in other settings. And I feel that people from underrepresented groups are disadvantaged often by the just overarching structure. So I think that anything that can help to, you know, create connections for these people and to connect them to resources, you just never know when these sorts of things can, even some seemingly small thing can make a huge difference in somebody's career. So, you know, throughout my own career, I have kind of quietly in the background tried to make sure that those connections were made for people who, you know, who were highly qualified. And I could go into lots of anecdotal examples, and I don't think that this is the time or place to mention names, but I've seen, you know, I have a long list of people and anecdotal stories where I can say, well, this thing happened, and I think it made a big impact in them getting a tenure job at a good place, or, you know, getting hired as a full professor somewhere, right? And it wasn't a matter of, you know, treating them necessarily differently from the other candidates. It was just making sure they had the same benefits. So that's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing I wanted to say is in terms of like actual, you know, putting money on things and so forth. One thing that I've seen, at least at UCLA and also at some other institutions that I think can help is if you have an administration that you know, wants to be proactive in case there are really good candidates coming from diverse, you know, whatever the diversity criteria is. And so that would mean like, you know, maybe giving an FTE like a year early because of an extra candidate, you know, you have to have somebody who is in power to create positions. Or sometimes it's just, you know, providing a little extra startup. I know that that was instrumental, for example, in my choosing to move to UCLA. We had a diversity, you know, person in the administration, and money was scarce, but, you know, just a little extra money in my startup package made a big difference for me for reasons I won't go into in terms of making that decision to move to UCLA. So, you know, I'm very much of the opinion that if people pay attention to these issues, and I don't think that everyone does, right? I think you have to pay attention to it, and you have to try to be proactive for good candidates. I think that if you have it very top down, sort of forcing departments to choose a diversity candidate above everyone else, it's going to create bad relationships between the department and the upper administration. I don't see that as being helpful. I think it can lead to, you know, it can cause more harm than good potentially. So you have to be really careful with that kind of thing.
Thank you. I loved, in particular, one of the things that you said, Andrea, that something seemingly small can often make a big difference. And,
exactly.
As I see it, these serendipitous small things, one doesn't know where they're coming from, but it's our job to increase the likelihood of serendipity. So just these sorts of happenings, things where people can get together, and I feel that it's more likely that you're just going to have that chance conversation that's going to be the thing that changes your career path or makes all the difference, or that chance connection.
That's right. These aren't things you can put, as a senior person, these aren't things you can put on your resume, nor should you want to. It's just how you do your job.
Very good, thank you. I promised the panelists that we would give them a bit of time where it was still streamed live, but it wasn't recorded, so that they could maybe speak more openly if they wanted to. So if everybody's happy, what we might do is now we might stop the recording